In the year 7 BC, under the cold winter sky of Judea, a black dome glimmered with sharp points of fire. Among those stars, a new light caught the attention of 3 scholar priests traveling from the east, men trained to read the heavens as if they were scrolls written by the gods themselves. They were not wandering nomads or storytellers. They were Magi, part of a priestly class from Persia and Babylon, whose craft was to interpret the movements of planets and stars as signs of kingship and destiny. When they saw this particular light, brighter and stranger than what they expected, they gathered their caravan and began a journey toward Jerusalem, a provincial capital that would soon become the center of a religion spanning continents and millennia. This single event, later called the Star of Bethlehem, would ignite one of the most influential stories in human history, and our task is to uncover what truly happened in the sky that winter. To do that, we set clear rules because not every bright dot qualifies. The phenomenon must fall within the historical window of Herod's final years. It must be striking enough to catch the attention of trained observers and compel them to move across deserts toward a specific land. It must be visible first from the east and then continue to guide as they traveled westward, finally still being prominent near Judea. Most importantly, it must plausibly fit the narrative details preserved in the Gospel, where the light seems to move ahead of them and then stop, standing over a single place as if to mark it. These conditions form the filter through which every candidate must pass. We will test planets slowing and reversing in retrograde motion. We will explore heliacal risings when a celestial body first becomes visible at dawn, and we will examine close conjunctions where 2 bright objects fuse into one blazing point of light. Each will be weighed against our checklist to see if it can carry the weight of history. The promise by the end of this journey is simple and bold. We will reveal the most convincing astronomical trigger, not as a myth, but as a real event in the night sky. And we will see how that brief blaze, whether planet, nova, or comet, became more than just light. It became a symbol so powerful that it shaped calendars, filled canvases and cathedrals, directed pilgrimages, and built the language of kingship for 2,000 years. The Magi were not wandering mystics gazing at the heavens out of idle curiosity. They were a trained elite, scholar priests from the Persian and Babylonian world, men who inherited centuries of astronomical records and omen catalogues stretching back to the first great empires of Mesopotamia. Their vocation was to treat the sky as a coded text, a script where every movement of a planet or star carried meaning for kings, dynasties, and empires. To them, Jupiter was no mere bright light, but the king planet, a celestial marker of authority, rulership, and coronation. Regulus, shining at the heart of Leo, was known as the King Star, a fixed beacon of sovereignty. Within their astrological frameworks, constellations themselves were linked to regions of the world, and in certain schemes, Aries was associated with Judea, a connection that could turn a planetary dance in that sign into a direct omen for a small province under Roman rule. This was not superstition in their eyes, but a refined system of symbolism grounded in detailed observation, charted with meticulous care in astronomical diaries preserved across generations. Trade routes carried more than silk and spices between Mesopotamia and the Levant. They carried ideas, texts, and methods, ensuring that the intellectual traditions of Babylonian skywatchers fed into the world where the Magi operated. By the time of Herod the Great, whose final years near the turn of the era give us the critical historical window, this interpretive machinery was already ancient and authoritative. Any candidate for the Star of Bethlehem must shine within those years, between the late single digits before the Common Era and the early single digits after, because this is when the political drama of Judea demanded such a sign. The Magi were not tourists pointing in wonder at a comet streaking across the sky. They were professionals who charted the precise slowing of a planet as it approached retrograde, who noted when it halted against the star field, and who understood that such a stationary point could signal the arrival of a king. What might seem to modern eyes like a subtle shift of light, barely perceptible to an untrained observer, could carry the full weight of destiny to them. The difference between a casual glance and a priestly calculation was the difference between a pretty sky and a cosmic proclamation, and that means the true key to the star may not be a sudden blaze or fireball at all. It may instead be found in a carefully timed celestial dance, led by the king planet itself, Jupiter, performing a royal drama that only specialists could recognize as the birth of a new ruler. When we lay the options side by side and test them against the strict conditions we set, a short list of serious contenders emerges. The first is the triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 7 BC, when the two great planets appeared to meet not once, but 3 times over the span of several months in the same portion of the sky. To a casual eye, this might not have looked extraordinary, 2 bright points sliding close and apart again. But to a professional astrologer, the repetition and persistence would have been thunderous. In their symbolic language, the king planet joining Saturn, a figure of time and authority, within a constellation associated with Judea, would have been read as a major headline in the heavens, a signal of dynastic change and a new ruler. Its weakness is that it may not have drawn the attention of ordinary viewers, but the story is not about ordinary viewers. It is about trained Magi who would see meaning in a pattern invisible to others. The second contender is the spectacular close conjunction of Jupiter with Venus, occurring in 2 BC. On that evening, the 2 brightest planets in the sky approached so tightly that they would have looked like a single dazzling star, brighter than anything else above Judea. Such a conjunction is rare, memorable, and dramatic enough to cause even untrained eyes to stop and point. And for astrologers, it carried heavy symbolism as the union of the king planet with the planet of birth and new beginnings. The third candidate comes not from planetary dance, but from stellar birth, a nova or supernova. Chinese records describe a new star appearing in 5 BC that persisted in the sky for weeks. That fits the description of something new, bright, and stable enough to guide travelers night after night. The weakness is that we do not know if it was visible with equal clarity over Judea, or how the Magi would have interpreted it. But the fact that a new star was recorded is a compelling piece of evidence. A fourth option is a comet, which matches the criteria of brightness, motion across the sky, and duration long enough to be followed during a journey. Yet in Mediterranean culture, comets often carried the connotation of doom, disaster, and the fall of rulers rather than their birth, which complicates its symbolic fit with the story. Among all these, the crucial textual clue is that the star went before the Magi and then seemed to stand still. Here, planetary mechanics deliver a clean explanation. As Jupiter approaches retrograde, it slows, halts against the star field at its stationary point, and then reverses course. To the naked eye, this halt can last several days, during which Jupiter appears suspended in the heavens. If the Magi had been traveling from Jerusalem south to Bethlehem, the king planet, reaching such a station in the southern sky, would have appeared exactly as if it were standing over a specific direction. This maps elegantly onto the narrative. Taken together, the working verdict that emerges is that the most coherent candidate is not a random fireball or comet, but a months-long royal pattern centered on Jupiter. Whether crowned by the awe of a Jupiter-Venus conjunction that fused 2 great lights into one blazing star, or marked by the king planet reaching its stationary point, the case for Jupiter as the backbone of the Star of Bethlehem best satisfies the criteria of symbolism, chronology, guidance, and that haunting image of a sky that pauses over a small town and declares the birth of a king. Once the story of a strange light was woven into the account of a royal birth in Judea, it ceased to be an isolated astronomical event and became a permanent proof that the cosmos itself had bent down to confirm the arrival of a king. For early Christians, this detail was more than decoration. It was a cosmic seal of legitimacy, a claim that the heavens had proclaimed what earthly powers tried to deny. Artists from the earliest centuries seized on the motif, placing a bright star above every manger scene, painting it into mosaics and carving it into stone so that each retelling of the Nativity bore the mark of celestial authentication. As the faith spread, the geography sanctified by the star became fixed into pilgrimage routes. Bethlehem was not just a provincial town, but a place over which the sky had once stood still. And that made the journey to its shrines an act of walking in the path of the Magi. Preachers folded the image into their sermons, linking it to ancient prophecies that spoke of a star rising out of Jacob. And through this fusion of scriptural expectation and astronomical wonder, they recruited converts across cultures and empires. The star also seeped into calendars. Feast days marking the birth were tied to that scene, and the annual retelling of the star's appearance synchronized the rhythm of worship with the memory of a single night sky. Courts borrowed the logic as well. Kings and emperors sought to frame their own power through celestial omens, borrowing the model that a ruler crowned by the heavens is a ruler crowned beyond dispute. Over centuries, this single sign reshaped how ordinary people thought about the stars themselves. The night sky was no longer a mute expanse of fire, but a living stage that could announce the turning of ages, speak in symbols, and validate human destiny. The pattern has repeated in modern times. When the Apollo 8 astronauts captured a photograph of Earth rising above the gray horizon of the Moon, that single image reoriented public feeling about the planet, sparking environmental movements and a new consciousness of fragility. The mechanics of how light is read into meaning have not changed. A solitary blaze, framed correctly and retold endlessly, can redirect human imagination and behavior at global scale. The Star of Bethlehem, whether planetary dance, nova, or comet, did not only move 3 scholar priests on their desert road, it set in motion the emotional architecture of a world religion, building a bridge between sky and earth that still holds the weight of faith and culture after 2,000 years. No single answer can claim the crown beyond doubt, and intellectual honesty demands we admit that. The Star of Bethlehem will never be proven in courtroom terms because the records are thin, the language is symbolic, and the sky offers multiple candidates that fit parts of the story. Yet, when we place the pieces on the table, a coherent picture emerges with Jupiter at the center. The king planet offers everything the narrative requires: symbolism that any trained astrologer would recognize a timeline that falls within the last years of Herod, and planetary mechanics that allow it to appear as though it moved ahead and then stopped. The triple conjunction with Saturn supplies the long royal drumbeat, repeated meetings in the same region that would have shouted significance to the Magi. The conjunction with Venus supplies the visual shock, a sudden blazing point so bright it could be remembered generations later as the very star that marked a birth. And the stationary point during retrograde motion supplies the textual detail, a real astronomical event in which Jupiter seemed to halt in the southern sky exactly in the direction of Bethlehem. These together explain not only why professionals from the East would undertake a long journey, but also why the story survived with its specific description of movement and stillness. Alternatives cannot be dismissed. A nova recorded by Chinese observers is a strong possibility, appearing new and bright, persisting for weeks, and capable of guiding travelers night after night. Yet we lack certainty that it was visible with the same clarity over Judea, and the cultural weight of a nova is less precise than the royal symbolism of Jupiter. A comet likewise fits duration and motion, but suffers from a darker interpretive frame, often seen as a herald of death or disaster in the Mediterranean, rather than of a king's birth. What matters most is not a single verdict, but the method that brought us here. We defined historical constraints, examined the candidates by mechanics rather than speculation, and saw how subtle motions of light could be read as proclamations of destiny. That method itself is the enduring lesson. The heavens have always been a stage where humans project meaning, and a transient configuration of planets or a single new star can be enough to bend art, law, pilgrimage, and power for centuries. A light that blazed briefly above Judea helped to build the emotional scaffolding of Christianity, proof that even the cold sky could announce the turning of ages.